Hi, everyone. Dr. Maria Sampalis here. I got Dr. Kristen Brown on the podcast today. Amazing Women in Optometry Spotlight. So glad to have you on the podcast today, Dr. Brown.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've done a lot of great things in the industry and a lot of great achievements. So I wanted to highlight you today on the podcast. And for those of you that don't know Dr. Brown, she graduated from California Berkeley School of Optometry in 1992, did 2 ocular disease residencies, one at NECO and one at Brown University School of Medicine. In addition, 2-year fellowship in ocular disease at Pacific Cataract and Laser Institute, 1995. Research fellowship in ocular pathology from Brown University School of Medicine in 1997. Wow. And 30 years of experience as a clinician, educator, a speaker, industry leader, and has been appointed in the past for multiple optometric institutions at NECO and MCPHS, and is currently the Associate Dean of Clinical Affairs at NECO. And in the past had leadership position at as the clinical director of TLC Laser Center. So welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on it as a role model for a lot of female ODs in the industry.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Just give us some background. How did you end up in academia?
It's interesting. I was thinking about this earlier, and, academia was not sort of my planned path. And a lot of what you just read and what I've done in terms of my experience really came about a little more organically in terms of pursuing what I wanted to do. And in optometry school, yes, 30 years ago, I feel those years, was really this interest in ocular disease and wanting to pursue that further, wanting to see more ocular disease, wanting to feel comfortable managing it, and just really being fascinated and loving the physiology and the pathophysiology of the eye. So it led me to that first residency at NECO. So that's really how I came into academia originally. And that was on purpose, of course. But then a lot of it was sort of like, okay, what's next? There was not an obvious go-to at that point. And so thinking, where I would go after residency was more about what are the opportunities out there? And so at the time, we didn't have a lot of internet. We didn't have a lot of social media. And so the opportunities really came about through looking at the AOA news, right, where jobs were posted. And that's where I saw that fellowship. And I thought, okay, that looks like another great direction to go. And I have to say, those 2 experiences were probably most pivotal in terms of the interest in ocular disease management, but also delving into the co-management of ocular surgery. So whether it was cataract surgery or refractive surgery, which was just coming about at that time in the late 90s, and then the opportunity to work at a refractive surgery center came about. So started as a resident, went away for a bit, and then came back when I had my 2 daughters. So initially my oldest in 2000, and I needed a place where I could feel that I still had an impact, but needed to step back a little bit from the, 50, 60, 70-hour work weeks, which, was a factor back then. So I'm not even sure how it all came about, but I think somebody, it might have been Dr. Scott from NECO, came and said, hey, would you be interested in precepting? And got back into it, was working with students in a clinical setting at a community health center in Boston, and fell in love with that kind of practice, not just the patient care and the serving an underserved or minority underserved community, but working with students and helping them understand how do we make a difference for patients in that particular environment who struggle with access to care. So that just really grabbed me. And I did that for about 10 years. And now that I'm back at administration, again, it was a little more of a, hey, you should take a look at this position that's available. So it wasn't me necessarily saying I want to go back into academia, but the opportunity to go back and have an influence either on the profession in a different way. So I've loved throughout my career that I've had that opportunity, but in academia, it's really that opportunity to have an influence at an earlier stage in someone's career. And so that's what led me back.
Yeah. And those opportunities is when they come to you, you don't go searching for them. So people see something good in you, the best. And sometimes as young ODs, you don't see everything that other people see, but they see something in you, and they'll recommend a position or help you or mentor some of these young ODs. And I think you having a position and someone they can look up to is a great way for these young ODs to, if they want to be in academia, want to be a clinical preceptor, or want to have a leadership position at TLC, at a corporate location, have a private practice, there's opportunities there. And,
For sure.
all your different advanced studies that you've done with residency, fellowship, and things like that is admirable, because a lot of us just say, okay, I got my degree and now I got to go out, but you keep seeking that. And I think that's very admirable for me, because I was like, more schooling after this. I'm like, I just want to go practice and pay off my loans,
Well, I had I was fortunate where I did not have the kind of loans that our students have today. And that is really a huge challenge. And that's an opportunity really in the role that I am on the leadership team with the college to really look at ways that we can make education more affordable, where we can make it more accessible, where students don't have to graduate with this huge debt to income ratio, right? And optometry is still a wonderful profession and pays well. But education is so costly. So I really, undergrad in optometry, had so few loans that wasn't a driving factor in my decisions. Really, I had the luxury of being able to say, what do I want to do? What do I really find interesting? And so it never occurred to me, oh, do one more fellowship or one more residency. I mean, I could have become a career student, right? And so it was really about, what are the opportunities out there and what really is in alignment with what I'm passionate about. And when you've done that for a while and you put your head down and you just do the work, suddenly you look up and then people might be coming to you saying, oh, you might be a good fit for this thing. And so I just have been so unbelievably fortunate and really blessed in my career path, because I've practiced in so many different ways that's what I love about what we do. It doesn't have to be, you do this thing and you do it the rest of your life.
That's correct. Yeah. Optometry is a great
People can too, right? Yeah, exactly. So many in academia start out and maybe finish, but not all, right? It's a mix. And so I love seeing young graduates think about coming back, whether they're residency trained or have been out for a little bit, to really come back, because it is a really awesome opportunity to give back. And that means, give back in an educational, whether it's a lab setting or a clinical teaching setting, or even maybe in a mentoring setting. And so it's really a great way to give back.
Great. Yeah. NECO has done a great job recently getting scholarships for students, and maybe so they don't have to really focus on that stuff and really go after their passion, what they really want to do in optometry. And also maybe it's private practice, maybe it's corporate practice, maybe academia, but they don't have that burden of that. And that's great how they're leading the way in optometry to start that scholarship. And I think other colleges have followed and tried to copy NECO. So being the leader in that spotlight has been great.
And that's been really a wonderful thing to see in the last couple of years. And I really give a lot of credit to Howard, Purcell, who's our president, as you know, and thinking, outside the box. How can we do this differently, where we may not, be providing that scholarship, but we're partnering our students with entities, whether it's, a private practice type entity, a group private practice entity, or a corporate type entity, but whatever it is that can help those students pay for their optometric education for a commitment for a period of time after school is a huge game changer. We have had immediate success, and just students are clamoring for it because it's such a wonderful opportunity. I know traditionally it's been there, for example, through, the military perhaps, right? Where you have your studies paid for, but then you make that commitment. And obviously it's a little bit different if you're going through the military versus doing this in a private or corporate setting, but there has been very, a significant interest from our students, and it's really wonderful to be able to be a part of that.
That's great. Yeah. Because some of the scholarship, there is no commitment. It's just some corporations just want to help certain population, and they want to get them through and have better representation in optometry and make it diverse. And others, there is a small commitment for to be an employee, but still the opportunities are there, and they're
Absolutely.
and I think they're great opportunities, and it's great to see innovation in the schools where some things just take a long time. So
and you made a point too. I mean, we really have several tracks, and one, it's simply a large organization that says, you know what, I want that diversity and equity and inclusion in optometry. So, people of color, maybe women in certain positions, but, we talked about this earlier. We might be seeing a little bit of a trend where, maybe we want to encourage more men to come back into optometry. If we're at a 50%, practicing docs, that's still about 70+% women in optometry school. And so, but again, no matter what the focus, if we can help students access education and it be more affordable. So whether we're looking at developing different ways to access learning, in a hybrid format, these are all different ideas that we're really looking at and thinking about how do we do it differently.
Yeah. What are some things that you've really loved about your career? Because you've had a different journey and different areas of optometry you practiced.
Thank you. That's a great question. That I would say, and I find myself looking back a lot more these days than looking forward, which is kind of a strange place to be, but I really do love it. And I look back with such, gratitude over the opportunities that I've had. The thing that I love most that I've had all along, but I still have, and I think all of us can have it, is just really the opportunity to learn something new. It doesn't have to be in an academic organization. It can be in a clinical setting. It can be research. It can be in a corporate setting, but really that, it sounds a little, cliche to say lifelong learning. Looking back, if you stay interested, you will always find something that keeps you excited to learn. The fact that we have new technology, I never imagined I would be incorporating new technology that feels like enhanced scope of practice for optometry without necessarily going to the legislator and getting enhanced scope of practice. You know what I mean? For example, in the dry eye space, doing some of these in-office procedures has really just kept me energized, and I'm not anywhere near thinking, it's time to slow down. I'm thinking, what's next? What new thing is going to interest me and my colleagues, but also really benefit our patients? And so those kind of opportunities and the willingness to continue to learn and the interest, the drive to keep learning has what's really enhanced not only my clinical practice, but my relationships with my patients. They get excited along with us about these new things that we can offer. So I would say if there's one thing, that's it, that the learning never ends, and it shouldn't.
No, that's true. Yeah. Optometry is evolving profession. Each state has different scope, but I'm waiting for Rhode Island to get laser. And I'm like, well, I got to learn that. And that's great, right? That's what you want to do, better for your patients. But just me being like an optometry geek, I got like a new OCT, and I waited for Topcon to come set it up. They set it up late the night before. And then, so I ended up going to the office early just to play with it, and you're excited. You make a better clinician, better patient relationships, better track for diagnosed disease, things like that. But yeah, there's so much new things in optometry. I've been out 16 years now. It's changed in 16 years, right? And you still have to learn, right? You don't just graduate and just go into practice and stay the same. You got to continue to learn. And there's a lot of great education programs out there for CE and stuff like that, just to stay up to date.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, there's sort of the formal pathways for learning, right? But there's the informal things. And I would say if there's anything else that I've really looked back and think, wow, I am so glad, are the relationships. And for example, relationships with industry. The people that I got to know early in my career who'd stop by and say, hey, I've got this new eye drop, Dr. Brown, would you mind, see what you think, tell me about it, help me understand the science of it, the pathophysiology of it, the mechanism of action. And those relationships, they need something from us, we need something from them. And I don't mean in a inappropriate sort of, influential way that way, but it's just a relationship, and so academia is getting a little more comfortable with that partnership. And it may be who we have leading our organization, but I've always had a comfort with those relationships, right? So it's, maybe outside of formal CE, for example, those partnerships, those people that you can call on and they can call on you for a question, an opinion, a perspective. And so I've really enjoyed those relationships. Now, part of it was because of my career at a refractive surgery center, where it was my job to network and build that network of co-managing, referring eye doctors. So those relationships I cherish, and they're colleagues, and they always will be. But including those relationships with industry partners, whether it's technology companies, device companies, pharmaceutical companies, et cetera. I see that, we're all in the same ophthalmic field. So I've enjoyed that.
Yeah. No, you've been practicing for a while now, and you have leadership positions, and I've done some data. It's a lot of research on this, and see it. And fortunately, there are a lot of female optometrists practicing. I think it's 50-50. But the leadership gap is still there. For females. There are some inequalities, unfortunately, and there's still some biases. What have been some biggest challenges for you as you faced as a female optometrist, kind of being that leader in the clinical setting, now a leader in academia, and now, you looking into industry? Give some insight on that to our listeners that, is a young female that wants to, be a leader in the industry, and what they can do, and to know that they, this has been done before, faced before, so they're not alone.
Well, and that's a great question, because I think, today there are more models, right, to look up to and say, oh, they did it, I can do that, right? And granted, 30 years ago, there were fewer women in leadership roles. I would say clinically that has changed dramatically, right? As you just mentioned, 50-50 practicing women versus men in optometry. And so I love seeing that our students have those role models, and there's no shortage of who they could be, whether it's a male role model or female, right? But when you see a woman like yourself in a field, in a leadership role, it just gives you that assumption that, hey, we can all do this, right? When I was in optometry school, I think I had one female role model in the clinic, and she was amazing. And I know her name, I know what she looks like. And she probably has no idea the kind of impact it might have had on me, thinking, I want to be like that. Didn't necessarily want to do what she was doing, but I wanted to be like her.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be strong and confident. I wanted to be good at what I was doing. That good at what I was doing was the absolute number one thing that I pursued. And I wanted to do whatever I was doing, in whatever role I was in, I wanted to do it well. And so I've always been drawn to women in positions, no matter what they're doing, that they're doing it well, that they're leaders, right? They're strong at what they do. And so it's just, how do you get there, right? You don't sort of decide, I'm going to be a leader, right? In an organization, I'm going to be, on this leadership team. And I learned over my career that you put your head down, you do the work, you get good at what you want to get good at, but then you also get good at asking for that acknowledgement and that recognition by, challenging, let's say you go for a job and you get an offer. It still happens, maybe not as much, and I'm glad to hear that, but probably the first 2 or 3 job offers was like, okay, thank you. Without doing the research, without knowing, without having the information, is this equitable? We've seen some research that shows that early on in optometry careers, there is significantly less difference now between what women and men make or can make, right? Whether it's private practice, whether it's whatever setting. There are still, some significant differentials the higher you go, right? And so
Correct.
A little hard for me to kind of change that path right now. Well, hard to change it on my own behalf, or on, women in at my age, let's say, at my stage in career, right? And so I still think we face some of those differences or gaps, if you will. But simply by attrition, there will likely, continue to be changes. And when you look at the percentage of students in undergraduate that are women, it's like 75%, which is almost, well, one might say, well, that's great for women, but it's like, I don't know, is that concerning? What does that mean, right? From the standpoint of now that feeds professional schools such as optometry, we're going to see a higher percent of women in optometry. And it may be that, men are preferring different fields such as, high tech, that kind of thing. So I think medicine might be seeing that same trend. In any case, I think, I am pleased to see change over time. There's been barriers, right? And I think doing that research, I think when it comes down to thinking about those intrinsic versus those extrinsic rewards for a particular role or salary or position, find that balance, right? Is this what you really want to be doing? If you're doing it for only extrinsic value, the salary or the title, or maybe even the prestige, you're going to get burned out.
That's
and
correct.
You're not going to do it. So it's okay to change too, right? That's another thing that I would love to, if I were to look back and say to myself 30 years ago, starting out, or even 20 years ago, 10 years in, it's okay to change. I mean, I was never in a role where I felt I was staying beyond when it was appropriate, but it's okay to change and do things differently, right? That doesn't seem to be a problem with young people today, but
Yeah.
I'm glad that I, had those opportunities. So it's, finding that balance though is really important, and looking, the why you make a decision to do something.
Yeah. Just going back to what some differences. I did do some research, had some data from Women in Optometry magazine, and just some data across all the O's: optician, optometrist, ophthalmologist, and it has seen that females have had lesser salaries, and also, even if they are the same, sign-on bonuses being a little different, and other things too, and just overall packages. And I do review a lot of contracts for optometrists, and I do it as as a benefit to them, to help them, because I wish I had someone to just to watch out for. And sometimes I see the same benefit. I mean, same contract, different gender. One has a sign-on bonus, one does not. So sometimes it's just teaching some of these young females how to negotiate, be aware, be confident, and always it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to ask, say, to be at the seat of the table, and you just have to question them sometimes. And sometimes it will be a lot more difficult than others, but the more barriers you kind of break, the easier it just keeps going after that.
Absolutely.
And
there's a lot more information out there too about salaries. There's a lot more people like yourself willing to help out, to say, you know what, hey, does this make sense to you? I've been given this offer. Is this a reasonable rate for this kind of a position? So really being that advocate for, again, whether it's graduates that are asking me, do you know somebody looking? I love that. I love being able to say, I mean, I don't ask people what they're making per se, but if they have questions for me about that, I'm very happy to give them a perspective on, what, that's reasonable. And women tend to do this thing, right, where we personalize it too much. Somehow that's tied to our value. So we should be the ones to define that, right? It doesn't have to be personal. It's just business. And so write down the question on a piece of paper, right? And make yourself ask, for more, for a sign-on bonus, for something more. Simply accepting that offer that was provided when you have very little information, you're not doing yourself, you're just doing yourself a disservice. And so talk to people in the field, look to people who are interested in being mentors, so there's just access to a lot more information out there than ever before. And I think that's something that, is important to utilize.
Yeah. And there are a lot of females out there that want to help young females, advance their career in optometry and move on. Because it betters optometry in general, right?
It does.
The stronger the leaders we all are, the more we can collaborate together, work, and build optometry up, right?
Exactly.
It's better for our patients too. So over the years,
it really is.
It's been confidence, and just getting that confidence just takes time. to build it. But yeah, it's nice to know that there are sponsors out there, people that have high positions that are willing to advocate for you and open some doors. But know that you still have to do the work. Once they open those doors, they can't hold it open for you forever. So again, like you said at the beginning, you have to do the work, just continue to do it to have it. But it's very important. So some people think that once they have a position, um, you know, they're done. That's not the case. As leadership position in optometry is continuing to evolve and change. You have to get better and learn more, like you do, right? Because now things are changing and there's new trends, new things to learn, new technology. So if you're going to be the leader there, you have to keep up with that. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and the position is not about you, right? It's about the organization. It's about the better. It's for things. So that's what a real leader is. And looking back, what would be some advice that you would give yourself as a young female OD?
Yeah, I started to go there a little earlier, and it's something you just said. In a lot of cases, 9 out of 10, it isn't about you. So if you're not getting that position you went after, if you're struggling in a particular role, or at a, even with a patient, right? 9 times out of 10, it isn't about you. I mean, that's something I've always loved about caring for patients. You go in that room, you shut the door, and you leave all the stresses and hassles of your life on the other side of that door, and you focus on that person, and it's about that patient. So it's not about, I mean, had I been able to know that a little more, I mean, it was naturally something I sort of slid into, and I thought, well, I love this about patient care, but I didn't really consciously realize that was what was happening until a bit later in my career, I think. But I think when you can, whether it's something you love doing and you're making it about somebody else, a patient, or being a mentor to somebody else, somehow that takes the angst out of it in a lot of cases, right? When you're not getting a job that you applied for, you didn't get the raise you asked for, again, 9 times out of 10, it just isn't about you. It isn't about your lack of qualifications. And so, I think I spent a lot of years wondering what was I doing wrong, or what could I have done better? I'm a bit of a fixer. So I'm always sort of thinking, how could I have been better? How could I have done things differently? Right. And so that's probably some advice I think I would give myself. I think, again, pursue what you love doing, the intrinsic value. Figure out first what you love doing. You may not know that. I mean, I always find it funny. Like, I have kids that, young ladies, daughters that are in college. One just graduated. And so I know when they were applying to colleges, it felt so consequential. I just need to get in, and then everything will be fine. I just need that next job and everything will be fine. No, you need to find a way to love what you're doing now. And if you can't, then you need to change what you're doing, right? And so if you're loving what you're doing, it doesn't feel like a job. It doesn't feel like work so much as you get to go do that thing that you love all day, right? And so, but there are times in your career where, when I had my daughters, I worked 2 days a week. And what I loved was being home with my daughters and being a part of their life. And so what you love changes and evolves, and how you want to do it evolves. So I think, I've just been super fortunate. I haven't had a lot of setbacks, but the confidence, took a while to get there.
Right.
And, that whole, focusing on people's opinion, if you can do less of that in whatever way, and, find out what you love. Those are the 2 main things.
Yeah, those are some great points. I did another podcast with another OD, and we just talked about, self-care and things like that, and being like, if I graduate, I'm going to be happy. If I get this job, I'm going to be happy. Well, first you got to be happy with yourself, because even if you get that high salary, you're not going to be happy, right? So you have to find out what's truly makes you happy as a person, and then and then also with work, people are like, you do a lot of work, Doc. So you see a lot of patients. You do this. I love what I do, so I don't really feel like it's work, right? And so I'm happy to do that, and I don't feel like it's work. But also, when I've over the years, when you applied for something, I wanted to buy this practice, wanted to take over this sublease, didn't get it. thing, I look back, you know, and I was discouraged. I was disappointed. Right. But now but when I was looking at that forward, but I look back, I'm like, if I got this other opportunity that came out of nowhere was like, so sometimes things I'm a planner, so you want all this path to go through. It just doesn't go that way. Like you had opportunities come to you. So it's the same thing that's happened with me over the years. Opportunities just come out of the blue. So, you want to try to force this plan, but maybe, someone else has a plan for you and how it's supposed to be. So, just enjoy what you're doing now and just, strut forward and keep going. So I think those are some great points that you pointed out, because I've experienced the same thing in my career and over the years. If I get this, I'll be happy. But
Right.
And I finally got to a point where, confident in what I want. And optometry is great in that profession as a profession to have the option to switch and do different things. But if you are someone that's listening that, wants that leadership, didn't get that leadership position, just keep tracking along, do the right things, do the work, and somebody will call on you that will see what, value you can bring to an organization.
Exactly. And you know what, again, we have an idea what something might be if we could just have that thing, a job, a position, a title, whatever, but it isn't everything. Right. And so, I hear you talk about how much, people say, oh, you work so hard, and you're like, but I love working hard. And I'm thinking, yeah, in a way, working hard and loving the work that I'm doing, it's like people have hobbies. And for me, sometimes maybe not always a good thing, work was a hobby.
Yeah.
And so as I'm getting a little bit older, I'm trying to find ways to delve into some of those hobbies that I started out, maybe as a kid, maybe playing the piano. I've played a lot of sports in my lifetime, and it's a little harder to do that these days with my body aging, but finding those hobbies and those passions. And I'm okay with the fact that work was a hobby for me in addition to my work, right? I mean, it sounds sort of silly, but I'm okay with that because, I didn't sacrifice having a family, if that's the way, it could be phrased. Some people might say, well, yeah, I wasn't interested, so that's okay too. But, have that hobby, have that something other than, let's say, work, and continue to pursue that. Because I think from a mental health standpoint today, again, our students, our undergraduates, our own kids, it just seems so consequential to them. They see everything on social media about what they should be or what they should pursue or what degree they should have. And really with very little sense of, is it the right fit for them? Is it, I try to help my daughters understand, listen, it's okay to change direction. You were studying biology. Now you're pursuing the business of fashion design. Wow. That's a change, right? But need to even get away from my own sort of, expectations about that and be open, be flexible with yourself about it's okay to change course even. And that's the luxury that I've had within optometry, is to be able to practice or be in a leadership role in different ways. So
what is some advice? I know you hinted on this. What's some advice that you could give young female ODs today?
I think it's a lot of what we've been talking about, right? Develop those relationships genuinely. Ask someone to be a mentor. I mean, it's amazing how seldom people say, would you be my mentor? You don't have to say those words per se, but you could. And it's amazing being at this stage in my career for someone to say that to me is like, oh, wow.
It's an honor. It's an honor.
An honor and a compliment. And like, really, like,
yes.
Okay. When you realize, oh, I do have that perspective to offer. I do have that, here's what happened in a situation like that for me type of thing. And so don't be afraid to ask. People love being asked. They want to hear about your experience. People love to talk about their experiences and their careers and what went well and where they would have done things differently, right? So I would say reach out, develop those relationships. They can be colleagues for the rest of your lives. I mean, the friendships that I have, the colleagues that I have, whether I worked with them for a really short time, it's like my tribe. I think about the people I've worked with in different settings, and when I see them again, it's like my people, and so you develop that tribe of people that you resonate with for whatever reason. I mean, I love seeing, for example, you go to these optometric conferences, and I don't remember the name of this band, but it's a bunch of optometrists up there, rock band. Like, wow, tell me they don't love what they do. Tell me that, it happened organically, right? So like pursue those friendships, put the time and energy into them, even, if you're in a different place. So those are things I would say that have really, I've loved, just about my time in optometry. I would say, go to the meetings, network, interact, stop at the booth, learn something new, stay engaged, right? And it's okay to step away from the intensity of it for a period of time and then come back when you're ready. It's not at the same pace in the same way for your entire career. So,
and everyone's journey and everyone's pace is different. Just because your colleague that you graduate is going 70 miles an hour doesn't mean that you need to be going. Maybe your pace is 45, whatever the case is. Maybe it stops for a year, 2 years, and that's fine. It's whatever you want optometry to be. So.
Exactly. And it's funny. I was listening to something, and I don't remember, maybe another podcast, but there's this thing happening. And the other thing I would say is I've learned, maybe in my life, maybe in my career, the value of gratitude, really appreciating the people that made a difference, right? It's mostly good, right? But sometimes you can appreciate that something that didn't go well, you learn something from that too, right? And so I've seen this thing or heard this thing where you write a letter of gratitude to somebody that, made a big difference in your life. And, the exercise of writing it, but then actually sending it or reading it to them or giving it to them is really impactful. And so I love that idea.
Huge.
And you know what? Anyone at any age can do it, right? Whether you're looking backward or looking forward or sideways, something somebody did, this opportunity to be here. I'm grateful for it. I mean, it's a fun thing to do. I love chatting with someone who's got kind of that similar background and similar experiences. And so be grateful.
No, that's important. Yeah. I mean, it's like you kind of read my mind. We haven't even, the podcast that we did the other day, another doctor, hasn't even been published yet. So, on gratitude and how it's important, and I was doing a podcast, I was saying did a podcast of optometry all over the world over the summer. And I got perspective. I was like, I'm going to go see patients right now, and I can dilate. This doctor in India cannot, and they look at us as the gold standard. And I'm like, how grateful should I be what I can do and change lives and see patients the way we can in optometry in the US. You take things for granted. And you're right. I've looked back over the last 7 years from doing, social media stuff, and people that, saw something at the beginning and opened a door or took a step forward, and then others that did not. But you usually focus on the ones that don't, right? But you look back and I'm like, wow, this person, believes in me when nobody else did. So you're right. So you send a positive note, and they were just like, they just did it because they wanted it, but they feel good about it. And now over the years, I've gotten I'll get an email or a text, or I'm like, wow, that just made my day.
Yes.
That just made your day.
So small.
But yeah, it's small stuff.
So small. And there's a great podcast called Hidden Brain that I listen to a lot. And he always does this thing at the end, an unsung heroes. So somebody tells a story about something that happened in their life, and they may never have seen that person again. They don't even maybe know their name, but they tell this story, and it's a really, again, intense, sort of impactful, like, wow, that's really amazing. And it could be the smallest thing, but I think there's a lot of things to be negative about. I think there's a lot coming at us. There's a lot less certainty about what we can expect in our lives. And that's hard. I mean, there's been a lot of stress and pressure on all of us, students, practicing docs, moms, dads, whatever. It's hard. And so, it's very easy to go here, what needs to be fixed? What's wrong? I'm a fixer. I'm going to go look and fix what's not going well, right? But I've learned how important it is to try to balance that out with, there is so much that's going well. There is. And even someone, in India, right? Just they develop a skill of being able to look at an eye and not being able to dilate, right? So they've got to figure out things that we have the ability to just throw a drop in and take a look, right? So I think, you find yourself in different places having to, different challenges, right? But also just being grateful for those challenges.
Of course, yeah. What do you think has been the biggest difference now and 30 years ago when you were starting out in your career?
Well, that's I can be really specific about that. And this is more, what popped into my mind was really more about how we practice, right? And so I graduated 30 years ago, never having any concept whatsoever that I would be pursuing an expertise in ocular surface disease and dry eye, right? Never thought I would do that. When I went to school, it was dry eye are people a certain age and they complain of dryness and it's artificial tears. We didn't talk about worm compresses back then. We knew nothing. And I'm a science kind of person, so I love understanding pathophysiology. I stressed about it in school, not being someone who could memorize, but I learned I was better if I just understood a concept. Then I would figure out the answer through, a path, as opposed to bing, there's the answer. I could never do that, right? And I try to encourage students today, there isn't one right answer. Don't look to the answer, rule out what it isn't, and then you'll get there, right? And so I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with this? So dry eye. We understand it at a level that we never imagined and how complex it is. This tiny microscopic layer of tears over the cornea and that whole environment, that microbiome, if you will, is so complex and so interesting. And that opens the door for all the different ways we can approach it and manage it and diagnose it, right? It's truly underdiagnosed and undertreated. And I never imagined 30 years ago when I was in school, I was bored with like dry eye, dry tears. Ho hum, that's boring. I want to get to the ocular disease, right?
Yeah, the action.
But few things are as complex. And so I love that. And that I did not see coming. I did not see, obviously a pandemic, but then what good came out of that was our ability to function remotely like this. And so obviously that's different for all of us. But as a student, that's a good question. Debt, just didn't have the debt. And so our opportunities felt much more, I think, wide open.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast, inspiring young females and being a role model in the industry and all the things that you've done. So thank you so much for coming on. If someone has a question, wants to reach out to you, do you have an email?
I do. I love sharing my email and I love students reaching out, or anybody. Sorry, I shouldn't just say students. When I'm doing admissions interviews, that's what I say. But anybody who'd like to reach out, I would love to hear from anybody. And my email is really simple. It's Brown, BROWN, K@neco, neco.edu. So I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation.
Well, you're one of the amazing women in optometry I wanted to spotlight. So it was easy to have you on the podcast.
Wow. Thank you. I'm grateful.